Thank you for joining us on the Going Deeper podcast, a ministry of Fathom Church in Littleton, Colorado. You will never get to the bottom of the depths that are in Christ for you. And our hope with this podcast is that it will help you go deeper with God. So let's dive into this episode of the Going Deeper podcast. What's up, church? This is your host, Kyle Knight, and welcome to the Going Deeper podcast, a podcast where we have conversations to hopefully help you go deeper in your relationship with God. I'm in the podcast studio with our very own missions and events minister, Karina Boss. Hello, Karina.
Hello.
And lead pastor, Chris Martin. Hello, Chris.
Hey. Dude, the back of your iPad has the biggest Apple insignia I've ever seen. What is that? Is that a sticker?
It's a sticker.
You put a sticker over the Apple on your iPad?
It was a black one. I don't know where I got these. I had two of them on my desk. Wow. I was like, that's pretty cool.
I was going to say that's some big Apple. You've got a big flame on the back of your iPad.
It's a campfire with a guy hiking at night.
Okay.
I don't know where I got it from. I didn't even stick it fully on there. It's just like between the case and the iPad.
Okay.
So I didn't want to I didn't commit like Kyle. I didn't want to permanently.
Well, you have a Fathom Church sticker on yours.
Yeah, because this is not my iPad. This belongs to the church.
Okay.
But yeah, okay. I thought maybe that was, I know what we're talking about today. I thought maybe you were just making a statement about how much you like to consume.
I love apples.
You love big apples. Big pieces of sin fruit.
Big pieces of sin fruit.
Okay. All right.
That's right. As you can see by the title of this episode, we're talking about gluttony. So Chris, start us off with, what is gluttony? Why are we talking about this?
Wow. Why would we talk about
big
gluttony? Gluttony.
Yeah.
So gluttony is probably a word that if you did, man on the street conversations with Gen Z, or young people, college people, young adults, they may not even know what it means. Mm-hmm. They may not. That might be a word that's foreign to them unless they were raised in a religious context. But gluttony is it's one of the 7 deadly sins that we traditionally kind of observe. The 7 deadly sins aren't something that is birthed out of the scriptures. They're just the 7 kind of sins that specifically the Roman Catholic Church identified as kind of root sins, big sins, kind of big ticket items. And gluttony is one of them. Gluttony is, I didn't write the exact definition down, but I would say it is, Karina just gave me I wrote the definition down sign. So should I try to give a definition and we'll see if it matches up, or do you want to just give the definition?
No, let's hear your definition.
That's right.
I would say that gluttony is eating in excess for purposes other than normal nutrition and nourishment.
You're really close.
That's my guess.
The actual definition that I got was habitual greed or excess in eating. So then I did the definition of greed, which is intense and selfish desire for something, especially wealth, power, or food.
Greed.
They threw greed in there.
Greed as that's awesome.
Defining gluttony with greed.
Cool. Love it.
So there you go.
Okay.
So yeah, that's what gluttony is. It's traditionally surrounding food. And gluttony is to food or eating as drunkenness is to drinking alcohol. That's the SAT version of that. That's gluttony is to eating. Eating is something that you have to do to live. It's a good and right thing. Jesus, the Son of Man, came eating and drinking. That's either of those are wrong, but drunkenness and gluttony are not permitted. Those are considered sinful. So there you go.
That's good. So then why now? Why is this a big deal now? Where have we seen gluttony? I mean, like you said, I bet you if you do ask the younger generation too, or a lot of people, they would have no idea that this is a problem, that this is a sin. So why do we need to talk about this? You said a lot of times in scriptures, we see it linked with drunkenness, which that we've done a podcast on. So it's like, we know that one, that's a sin. We know that stuff, but why is gluttony kind of linked with drunkenness? Why is this seen as a sin or such a bad thing? or when can it be a bad thing?
Yeah. Karina.
I think it's easy to hop over gluttony because it's kind of rampant in our country. You see it everywhere. And just even in our introduction, when we were talking about your big Apple sticker, it just this whole, like in produce, even in America, where we've had to exaggerate the natural size of, like, a normal apple is no longer good enough. It has to be 5 times the size. And so you just see it. You go to any restaurant and your whatever you order is naturally can serve 3 people probably.
Right.
And so it's just everywhere you turn, it's been so normalized in our culture that no one ever wants to talk about it.
Yeah, like obesity is a national pandemic. It's at like pandemic level, overweight and obesity, morbid obesity in the United States. Some of that is because food is so readily available and relatively inexpensive. So for the first time in human history, most of us don't spend our time only trying to figure out what we're going to eat. I mean, for most of human history, all of life was about getting food. From hunters gathering, that sort of thing, to farming and agriculture. It was always about food production. And most of us in Western, especially America, we don't think about that because we get to go to King Soopers or Safeway or, Sam's Club and buy as much food as we want for a relative, even though eggs cost as much as like, a gallon of gas or whatever, it's still relatively inexpensive to eat. And so why are we talking about this? Because it's a huge deal. And the one place that isn't really talking about this is the church. Because in a lot of ways, this seems to be an acceptable sin. It seems to be the sin that's overlooked because you would never want it. You would accept a pastor who is a morbidly obese person in a much quicker time than you would accept a pastor who is addicted to drinking alcohol or addicted to pornography or addicted to many different things. But if they're addicted to food, we'll overlook that. Why is that? That's why I want to have this conversation.
I mean, yeah, that's a good point. I would want to know, like, where in scripture does it talk about gluttony? Like, what does it say? What does it talk about? Like, whether it's in moderation or with drunkenness, like what does scripture say about the excess of eating? What is that likened to and everything? Like what does the Bible say about this?
Yeah, there's plenty of places. I'll just bring up one in Proverbs. There's multiple Proverbs concerning drunkenness, but Proverbs 23 verses 20 and 21 says, "Be not among drunkards or among gluttonous eaters of meat, for the drunkard and the glutton will come to poverty, and slumber will clothe them with rags." So, I mean, that's wisdom from Solomon, that there's wisdom in this, but there's other places we could go. Karini, I'm sure you have some scriptures. Do you want to share?
Yeah. I mean, I think at the root, gluttony is idolatry. It's making an idolatry. You're making like your stomach or food an idol. So I thought of Philippians 3:19. Their end is destruction. Their God is their belly, and they glory in their shame, and their minds set on earthly things.
Yeah. So I think it comes down to a wisdom issue, a sin issue, an idolatry issue. But then you can begin to look at associated scriptures in terms of scriptures about self-control, scriptures about abstaining from things. Even Paul saying, "Hey, I'll set aside things that I'm allowed to have for the good of others, for the good of the kingdom." And so there's lots and lots of kind of branches to the gluttony sin tree that we could even dive into.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask is like, what is, we might have people listening in and being like, I don't have a problem with that. Like, I don't have a problem with gluttony, with overeating, anything of that, like excess or whatever. But I was going to ask you before you said that, like, what is maybe the deeper issue rather than just overeating or eating too much food? And you said self-control, and you said self-control, I think, is a huge one that also, when this is paired with drunkenness so many times, that it's like, that is we talked about wisdom and self-control, and like when do you stop these things? Is that the big is that kind of the root of this? Is this self-control thing, this idolatry thing, this like we are just, man, we're just going for anything and everything that we can have now, especially in nowadays? Is self-control like the big thing that we need to, the root of this? Or is it deeper than that?
I mean, it's a fruit of the spirit that you are obviously neglecting to grow in if you struggle with gluttony, or if you aren't, maybe if you're just full on gluttonous.
And I think that's big to say that.
Right.
Like that's like, that is a fruit of the
It's
spirit.
the opposite.
So
So if Paul says in Galatians that there are fruit of walking in the spirit,
Right.
of being a spirit-filled individual, Christ follower, one of those is self-control, is the ability to say no to something, to many things, to anything, right? That would separate you from intimacy with Christ. And so one of those fruit of the spirit is self-control. And that's complete that's complete opposite. It's in complete juxtaposition to gluttony, because gluttony is I'm going to eat what I want to eat when I want to eat it, no matter what the repercussion is, both health and also maybe even cost, or whatever it might be. There's lots of negative ramifications, and it could even turn into something that is an addiction, right? Like you can become addicted to food, addicted to, and again, the problem with it is that nobody seems to think it's a problem. In fact, our culture, and in some ways rightly so, has swung the pendulum so far away from kind of the thin supermodel economy of like, this is what beauty is. And so you want to be rail thin, and you want everybody to think that that's the standard of beauty, to almost this whole like anti-fat shaming culture where it just says, you know what, you are beautiful no matter what. And yes, your worth and your beauty is not dictated based on your external appearance, but pendulum swinging from an unhealth around undereating to an unhealth around overeating is not the wise move for the Christian to do. Say it doesn't matter, because we don't want to be, the culturally relevant, supermodel obsessed beauty person. Well, then it just doesn't matter what I look like or what I eat or how much I weigh. There's health issues, but there's also spiritual issues that are underneath that. So yeah, I think it's a huge deal around moderation, self-control, and ultimately, like Paul says, I don't want to be, I will not be mastered by anything. Like I don't want to be mastered by my stomach. I don't want to be the guy who can't say no. And I'll tell you this much: I am not obese. Like I go to the doctor and I don't fit that, but I still struggle with gluttony. You don't have to be fat, and I don't mean that to be negative towards anybody, but you don't have to be technically obese or morbidly obese from a physical perspective to still not struggle with gluttony. Gluttony is not being able to say no to your stomach. And if you can't say no, then it is in control of you. You are not in control of it. So that's kind of my thoughts on this. What do you think, Karina?
Yeah, I think in prepping for this, I kind of was reading the Screw Tape Letters. I was reminded of the 17th letter Screw Tape wrote, which Screw Tape Letters is a book written by C.S. Lewis. And the 17th chapter was about gluttony and kind of the more modern, we do overeat and overindulge, but also we have turned our food into this idol of like, we will only eat just what it is, just the way we like it. So you should read the 17th letter from Screw Tape to get the full context. But we in America not only seem to excess in like what we eat, but we excess in what we want to spend on what we're eating. So all of a sudden, the nicest steak on the market is the only thing I can eat. The most bougie cup of coffee is the only coffee that's good enough for me.
Hey, don't go there.
Whoa.
Know your audience.
That's right. No, I think that's huge. Like it's not just amount. It can be like, it can almost be like a collector's mentality, like an obsessive mentality. So, some people who collect like certain types of whiskeys or collect, are very, very snobby about their coffee, or yeah, you're right. Like I won't eat that from I only shop at Whole Foods. It's almost like a mark of status at times. I mean, all of these things can kind of fall into some of this category where, yeah, it becomes pride. It becomes, like you said, greed built around our stomachs. I mean, it's fascinating where, as opposed to, I need to eat to survive. Now it has become a mark of status, become a mark of independence. It's become a mark of rebellion. Well, I don't eat there, right? Like, I would never eat there. Like, oh, okay.
Like poise and sophistication. Like,
looking down, it's a mark of, looking down upon other people, or even like, oh, well, I'm kind of a blue collar, Coors Light drinking. I don't do any of that, mamsy pamsy, fancy coffees at Starbucks. It's like, oh, so you're categorizing your identity is rooted in some of these things. Yikes.
Yeah. See, and I feel like just that conversation reminded me so much of, I mean, we've talked about this a lot with other sins and how it snowballs into so many other things, like our pornography episode that we just did, that it's like gluttony is gluttony, excessive eating, but like, so you guys just described so many other things that can come from that in pride and greed and all this other stuff. That's like, this is what happens when we don't have that self-control and we just let those things kind of get away from us. Okay. So what if, I guess the big question for me is like, okay, if somebody, it's like those other ones with pornography and everything, like if somebody's struggling with this, what do you do? Is a lot of the language you guys were kind of talking about reminded me of when we talk about fasting, when Chris, when you say like you fast, you're giving up something good, I think for something down the road, or I don't remember the exact words you said, but like,
I'm glad they've really settled deeply into your heart.
I had it, and then you guys kept talking. And I'm like, but like, it's what would fasting have to do with this? Yeah. Like, is that just something that somebody could go like, well, I will just fast, or is part of what fasting is in that self-control and saying no to something?
Well, so I think this is complicated. Okay. Because if you find yourself, even as we're talking about this, you probably would say, okay, yeah, I struggle with overeating. I struggle with saying no. I struggle with identity wrapped around, what I'm eating or what I'm not eating. If you find yourself in that place, first of all, that's a real gift that the Lord would reveal that to you, because this seems like an insidious sin that, like, you don't have to hide the same way. Like, most people hide their pornography habit. Most people hide how much they're drinking. But getting a second at dinner, second helping of spaghetti at dinner, might be a sign, but nobody cares. So, like, what a good and awesome gift that the Holy Spirit would convict you. That's the first thing. The second thing is this: it's complicated because it's not just stop eating, right? It's not as simple as like, okay, well then don't eat as much, like no more snacks. Or it's not as simple as like, well then hit the gym, right? Like, get you in shape. Like, your body is a temple. So like, why don't you actually take care of it? It's not as simple as that. Now that might be part of the solution. But I think I would say part of this is really doing the soul work with probably a pastor or a mentor or like a D group leader or something like that, to really figure out why you are overeating or gluttonous, or where that began. This might even be something you need to do with a counselor or a therapist, somebody trained on these things. But, you might be comfort eating. That's how you deal with stress. I mean, I've said this in sermons, but seriously, like there is something when you're stressed out of your mind that a bucket of Bluebell ice cream will do wonders for, right? Like the sound of the bottom of the, like you're scraping the sides off, like that feels like it's filling something, and in a real way it does, but it leaves you empty, right? And it doesn't actually help. So there's some real like psychological and spiritual things that you need to do some work on underneath this. So this isn't just as simple as, well, I got to shed that extra, holiday 15. It's more than that. It's more complex than that. And I think it really comes down to emotional and spiritual health that probably you're going to need some guidance on from somebody else. I don't know. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with you, because I think if you're not careful, you can swing from gluttony to like other sins. That it's you're right.
Right.
You can't. Not eating is not an option,
Right.
and that
Right.
leads to sin issues of itself. So, getting to the root at what is there, and just recognizing the idol that you have sitting there, that is food, whatever it looks like, and addressing that. And yeah, I think a lot of times we overlook the value of a counselor. Like sometimes it's just so embedded from, childhood experiences
Right.
or high school drama, whatever it is, and just recognizing and being able to seek that out through trained people, or even just, talking to your D group, or using the resources that we have.
Yeah, there's stress eating, right? There's coping eating. There's boredom eating. I mean, there's so many different reasons why people might start to enter into some gluttonous habits. And it's just too big an issue to be able to simply diagnose like this. It really requires some care and some counsel.
Yeah. And if there's some people listening that are, they think they don't have this problem or anything like that, I think this is one of those things that it is like, and I think we said this off the top of like, nobody really talks about this one, or it's totally forgotten because it's food, which is good. Like we are like, God gave us food because it's good. Like he wants us to, he wants us to eat. He wants it for our bodies. Food is good, but with anything that even God has given us, things come into it, whether it's like our view of this or how we value different foods or our status or whatever. It just gets plagued with different things, or our emotions get into it and we go straight to more food. It just, a good thing can become you said this once, a good thing can become a God thing, and that's where it becomes an idol. And it was meant for good, but this is the thing that we have to say, like, oh man, am I really just like the food thing is the problem? And maybe there's something deeper than that. When do I run to the fridge? When am I going for that ice cream or something like that? So yeah, I think this is a hard one to admit and to really like figure out, oh, that's what that's the issue. Like that's the problem, because this one is so just hidden really and hard to grasp.
Yeah, I think one of the best questions you can ask yourself is, where do I have a hard time saying no? That's not the only question, but I think that might be a good starting place. Like, where do I have a hard time saying no? Is it to a certain type of food? Is it to stopping after a certain amount of food? Is it to a certain time of day? Like, I'll tell you, man, it's just easy for me to get on the couch with the TV on, whatever's on, sports or, movie or something like that. If I'm on the couch, it's really hard for me not, like, even if I've just finished dinner, I'm like, I need to be snacking on something. Like, it's just, and that's a indicator that, like, okay, can I say no to these things? I mean, these are things that I wrestle with. And so I just think to ask that question, like, where are some places where you're having a hard time saying no? Now, some of those might be as easy as just really with some good accountability, starting to commit yourself to break habits. But some of those might be so deeply ingrained that you really do need some help. And we would love to be a resource to help you with that, whether it's with us or with referring you elsewhere. Man, I just think this is a sneaky one. It's like a sneaky sin that you could go your whole life and never address. And that would be a shame, because I don't think it's what's God's best for you.
All right. Yeah. Any last words? I just want to reread this Philippians passage just because it really does sum it up. It's Philippians 3:19. Their end is destruction. Their God is their belly, and they glory in their shame with minds set on earthly things. So yeah, church, if you're struggling with any of this, please reach out to us. We'd love to talk with you about it. But thank you guys again so much for this conversation. Thank you, church, for listening, and we'll see you next time.